So in the last video, we were able to show, based on the evidence, that God is a purpose-defining God, that He is an eternally powerful, incomprehensibly intelligent, purpose-defining, life-giving, holy and righteous God. Today we're going to be talking about rationale, the human brain, the ability to reason, where it comes from. Now, there are two worldviews that we're talking about. Remember, theism or atheism. And again, I would stress the importance that atheism is unscientific, because the observations the things that we observe tell us that there must be a life-giving, incomprehensibly intelligent entity that brought everything into existence. Observation tells us that this entity must be beyond the boundaries of time itself, eternal. It tells us it must be powerful. It tells us that this entity is also purpose-defining. And it tells us that it is holy and righteous. And so now today we're talking about rationale, the human mind, and whether or not we can trust our own thoughts. You see, in an atheistic worldview, how could you trust your own thoughts? Charles Darwin wrote a letter to someone, I forget what his name was, but he said, how can we trust our minds if all we are is advanced monkeys? If our brains are just advanced monkey brains? He had a question, he was thinking about it rationally, and he was trying to come to an answer where he could say, yeah, I can trust my brain. Because in an atheistic worldview, if all you are is an accident, if you're a result of processes of naturalism, if all your brain is chemical reactions that evolved from primordial soup, if you're a descendant of a rock, if you came to existence from non-life, then why would you trust your brain to tell you anything? Truth and error, well, what is it? What is it? Ultimately, what is true? What is false in a cosmic, ultimate sense? How could you trust your brains? That's a big decision, and that's a big problem with atheism. What's the point in making an argument at all? In that worldview, it's not consistent. In that worldview, truth, it's just not important. Making arguments are meaningless. But in a theistic worldview, they're very meaningful, because God is an intelligent designer, and He's made us in His image, and He's given us a mind to think rationally. Truth does exist. Lies do exist. Error and truth do exist. And so it is very purposeful to engage in debates, to exchange evidences, to try and come to the conclusion of what's real and what's not real, what's right and what's wrong, to grow in wisdom and understanding, are all very meaningful in the biblical worldview. But in an atheistic worldview, they're not meaningful at all. They don't make sense. And so this is the big problem with atheism. But God is a rational God. He's revealed Himself, because all we have to do is look at the creation, and we can observe that there is incredible order. We can observe that there must be a very intelligent mind behind all of this. There is an order to all of this. The human body is full of order. When your person goes to a doctor, they go to a person trained in the order and the design of the human body. They won't go to anyone, but they go to a doctor who's trained in the order. So we know there's order in design. And the way that we live our lives reflect that we know that. And all of this order is a reflection of a very logical mind, very intelligent behind it all. And so here we have it. God is an eternally powerful, incomprehensibly intelligent, transcendently rational. His logic is so far above ours, because His information and His wisdom are incomprehensibly intelligent. His intelligence transcends ours so far, therefore His ability to reason, which relies on what we've experienced, what we know, that's what we reason, that's the foundation from which our reason comes from, our experience and knowledge. And so because God has, His experience is just limitlessly transcendent to ours, His knowledge is limitlessly transcendent to ours, therefore His ability to reason and make arguments and what is true is also transcendently rational. And so rather than trusting in ourselves, it would be more reasonable to trust in the one who has far more information, who has far more experience, who designed absolutely everything in the universe, it's more reasonable to trust him than to trust us, because we know from our experience that we're fallen human beings, we do bad things, our brains aren't as good as we'd like them to be, we make mistakes, but it's reasonable to believe, based on the evidence, that God is very trustworthy. He is far more intelligent and wise than we are, so it's more reasonable to believe and trust in him. And so again, we've got these characteristics: an eternally powerful, transcendently rational, incomprehensibly intelligent, holy and righteous, life-giving, purpose-defining God. And so these are the attributes. These are the attributes that the science, the evidence, what we observe in the world around us leads us to conclude that this God does exist. And so it would be very wise to seek out who he is. It would be very unwise to go on putting your hands over your ears, putting your hands over your eyes, and saying, blah, 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 God doesn't exist. It's unwise. And Paul, an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, wrote to the church in Rome that since the beginning of the world, God's invisible qualities, even his divine power and eternal nature, have been revealed and are known to mankind, so that we're without excuse. He said that to the church in Rome. Everyone is without an excuse. Although people may not know who God is, they know that God does exist. And based on what we can see, we can derive attributes of what he's like. And that's what we've just done in these couple of YouTube videos. We've come to the conclusion that God is an eternally powerful, transcendently rational, incomprehensibly intelligent, holy and righteous, purpose-defining, life-giving God. And so now that you've understood that, it's your responsibility to go out and find out, well, who is this God? And I'm here to tell you that this God is Jesus Christ. He was crucified and buried in a tomb. God became a man and he lived among human beings. He lived a sinful and purposeful life. He lived a sinless life. He lived the way that he wanted us to live. He led by example. And as I said before, he was crucified. Even though he lived a sinless life, he took upon himself the sin of the world, and he bled on a cross. And then he was buried in a tomb, and he was raised from the dead. The same God who bled on that cross, he was raised from the dead. And then he ascended into heaven, and he's going to come back. And there's far more information to talk about Jesus, and there is lots of evidence to verify that he in fact was raised from the dead. There is evidence to prove that he is God based on over 300 very detailed prophecies. There is very real evidence that Jesus is God, and it's for that reason the apostles followed Jesus even unto death. It's based on the evidence. It's not a blind faith like many would portray, but it is very real evidence. So stay tuned for the next series, which will investigate what's the evidence that Jesus Christ is God. Thanks.